Hello, Michal Hucko here and welcome to another lecture of our REST API class. In this lecture, I'm going to show you how you can run HTTP server in your local computer. So in the previous lectures, we were talking about HTTP protocol. I mentioned that it's based on the communication between the client and the server. I mentioned that the server can be located somewhere outside of your computer. I was mentioning the physical server. In this video, I will use a term server in a more software sense. So the server or the program which is running on that physical server somewhere else. In this video, you will run the software server in your local computer. Why do we want to do that? In order to create a server, you need to develop it somehow. And the developers or the programmers, in order to do that, must run the server in their computer in order to find the bugs and do a lot of crazy stuff. When you are developing the server in your local computer, you don't want to expose it to outside. Why? Because many times some bad people can access your server and do some strange things there in your server. And in order to stay safe, you would rather have the server only accessible in your local computer. In this part of our class, I will show you how you can run it only or solely in your local computer and communicate, for example, from your browser with your local computer server only. Okay? In order to achieve this, we will use just Python, nothing else. I'm making this video just to show you how hard is it to implement this server from scratch. We won't be using any fancy framework like Django or Django REST or any kind of other frameworks which are out there. No, we will use the built-in libraries of Python to implement this kind of server. In order to understand what I'm doing here today, you must understand first something which I didn't mention so far. This thing is ports. What are ports? Many times you want to run multiple software servers, multiple HTTP servers in one physical server, so in one machine, for example, your local computer. In order to do this, you need to accept different kinds of communication for different kinds of servers running in your local computer. So you need to somehow manage multiple servers on one place, having one IP address. So there are multiple ways how you can accomplish this, and many times the ports are used for this. You can think of ports in this way. Many times this metaphor is being used online, so I will reuse it again, okay? It's not coming from my head, so apologize if I'm saying something you already heard. So imagine you want to send a letter to your friend who is living in a block of flats, this high building with a lot of flats inside there. So you know the address of the flat, but in order to send this list to a proper flat in this block of flats, you need the door number inside this block of flat. The IP address is the address of the block of flat, and the port is the concrete door inside this block of flat for that given family you want to send the letter for. Okay? And the same applies for the ports in the server. So in the server, multiple HTTP software servers can be running. And many times you want to distinguish between them, and you have the IP address for the physical server where these HTTP servers reside, but you want to be very specific to which of these servers the communication should go, so you are using the ports. Today we will be using the ports also. Okay, let's start with the practical example. In order to follow along, you need to have Python 3+. Okay, this solution which I will be showing you today is not applicable for Python 2. All the source code you will find attached or linked in the description below. Please go there, you will find there a link to my GitHub page. GitHub is a place where you can store your code. It's a version controlling hosting for Git. If you don't know Git, I highly recommend first reading something about Git before continuing with these lectures, but feel free to continue even if you don't know what is Git, you will learn it later. Okay, so on this GitHub page, you will find the code which I will be showing you today. So let's start very simple. I'm in my Google Chrome and now I want to run the HTTP server in my computer. So how do I do that? When you click on the source code, which is linked in the description below, you will find here a folder with two files. One is called the commands.sh and one is called the simple server.py. In the commands.sh, you will find this Python command, which you can run in your command prompt. I will run it in my git bash. This command is doing nothing else, just calling Python executable with the end parameter, saying that I want to specify the code in line. I don't want to provide any Python files, I want to run it directly. And here I'm calling http.server module from inside the Python built-in HTTP module, okay? So I want to run the built-in simple HTTP server, which is built into Python, and I want to run it on port 9000, okay? Before we move, you need to understand one more thing. When you want to do the HTTP communication, you need to know the IP address of the server. I mentioned it in the previous lecture. So the question is, if we are running the HTTP server in my local computer and I don't want to access it from outside, what is the IP address of the server? And there is some special IP address which is always dedicated for this purpose. This IP address is called 127.0.0.1, or many times an alias is used for this address, and this alias is localhost. I bet you heard it many times if you were using some kind of service running in your local computers. So localhost is a special dedicated IP address in your computer, which is not accessible from outside, but you can access it from inside your system. And that's where this simple HTTP server will be served. So inside the localhost on the port 9000. Okay, now I will show you how you can run it. In order to do that, I will use a git bash. So I'm in my git bash. And when you use this kind of special HTTP server, what kind of content it will serve? Okay, where do we specify what should be served? This is a special HTTP server serving the static files from the folder where the script will be run. So currently I'm in my tutorials folder, and if you look inside there, you will see that I have here multiple folders with a lot of examples which I will use throughout these lectures later. So some of these examples are in my school folder. There is a simple HTTP server, that's the folder which I have open here in my Visual Studio Code. Then I have here some whenever folder. This folder is dedicated for virtual environment. Future lectures, we will talk more about the virtual environments, and there is some .mypy cache which is dedicated for, running the Python more effectively. So you don't need to understand this now. What you should understand now, if I run this command from inside my command line, from inside this folder, all these files will be served for the outside world. I will call it outside world, but it will be only accessible for my local machine because I'm using the local host. So how to run it? You will paste it here, nothing else, just Python, okay? Before running this, make sure you have Python installed. So Python version 386. And when I run it here again and press enter, you will see that in a couple of seconds, the Python says, I'm serving HTTP on, this is a localhost shortcut, port 9000. So this is saying it's running on your localhost. When you go here and you go for the localhost, that 9000, you will access the directory listing. So this wasn't here before, right? If you shut down the server by pressing Ctrl+C, this is how you shut down the server, you access the localhost again, you won't get anything. You will have some error. But now when you access 9000 localhost, you have this output. Now, for those of you who are working for the first time with something like this, this can be a little bit magical. But what is really happening behind the scenes? If you click on the inspect, again to the network pane, and you refresh it, you will see that a HTTP GET request is being sent to the request URL of http://localhost 9000. Okay, so the same practice applies, or the same request or same behavior is applied as when you are accessing the google.com from the previous videos. Yeah. So, but in this case, the IP address or the remote address is the localhost. So the localhost is, even if I put here like 127.0.0.1, the same response will be here because the localhost is just the alias for 127.0.0.9. Okay, but if I go back, now you will see like, yeah, I'm sending it to this remote, to this server, which is running in my local computer. And if I go here, you will see that I am getting the GET requests here and I'm saying 200 response to them. And this response not only contains the 200 because you see 200, but it also has the HTML here. And this HTML here is automatically generated because I'm serving the static files. In reality, what you can do here, you can access these folders through this localhost, and you can access the files which are there. You can read the files. This is some of the files which we will cover in later lectures, right? So this is just serving. But here I wanted to show you that Python also has a module which is called the HTTP, which has a built-in simple HTTP server. Now, some of you may say, okay, so we're gonna use this built-in library, right? And everything will be fine. You'll see now why this is getting more complicated when you are adding more methods. So previously I mentioned that, you don't only want your server to serve some files, some static files. This is called static files. Many times you want your server to handle some data. For example, you want to write something to a dedicated database running on your server, or using post requests, or update something in the database, running put requests, or delete something, okay? You cannot do this right here. You cannot send a post pod get requests, for example, from your postman to the server. It doesn't work like this. In order to do this, you need to implement your custom server built on top of the simple HTTP server. And how you're gonna do it? Let's look at the example. Before I look there, one important note. Everything you will see is built on top of the simple HTTP server, and it's very complicated. You don't need to understand this. Later in the lectures, you will see how you can build this on top of, some framework which is called Django REST framework, where everything will be much more simpler. The goal of this video is to show you how complicated things are running behind the scenes. What you need to handle everything behind the scenes when you want to create the HTTP server. Okay? So when you click on the simple server.py, which is listed in the description of this video, you will see that in the first line, I'm importing the HTTP server, simple HTTP server from the HTTP server module from the Python. What I'm also importing here is something which is called the base HTTP request handler. This request handler is an important construct which allows us to create the guest pod put endpoints on our server to handle or to create the functionality which we want. Okay, we will start to analyze this code from the bottom. So first here is this main, and you need to have the main if you want to run it from the command line, which I will do in a short. And then we have here this important run function. This function accepts 2 or 3 parameters in this case. First is the server, which we will run. So the HTTP simple server, which is being imported. Then there is the handler. And here I have my custom handler. Okay, and this handler is dedicated for handling the specific methods, HTTP methods, which I want to, process on my server. And then I'm specifying the port on which the server will run. You know now something about the ports from the beginning of this video. Now, when you scroll up, the custom request handler is being specified here. The custom request handler inherits from base HTTP request handler. In order to follow along with the rest of these lectures, you need to understand how object-oriented programming works, okay? I'm assuming you know the basic concepts of inheritance, polymorphism, and overriding, all this kind of stuff, okay? So here, I'm just overriding the methods doGet and doPost, which are originally specified for base HTTP request handler, and I'm putting here my custom functionality. And when you look, for example, for the doGet method, this method does nothing else. It will first print into the console the get request and the path which is being sent. The path is what is specified behind the URL. In this case, the path is /. It's called a root path, and in most cases, it's automatically added behind the URL. But you can have very specific paths later. So for example, if I go to school, now the path is /.school, okay? So in this simple HTTP server, my custom one, I will first output it, print is output to the console here, get requests, path, and I'm saying the headers which are being sent to me. Because this is this is being provided to the HTTP request handler. When you will later run it here with the serve class automatically, you can access it through a self. Okay? And then this is just the console output. But now the next thing what you need to do, you need to create the HTTP response from scratch. And the HTTP response has these 3 parts which I mentioned in the previous videos. So the first one is the status line, right? So in this first line, I'm saying send response 200. I'm specifying that the status line for this request was 200. Okay? So the client will receive the response with 200. Then I'm setting the headers. Here you can have as many headers part as you want, send header part as you want. In this case, I'm setting the header. I'm saying like the content type which I'm sending you back is then HTML, because I just want to, trick a little bit I want to run this from my Google Chrome. So I'm tricking a little bit the Google Chrome saying like it's an HTML, but in reality I will send just a string. So I'm a liar, but whatever. And here at the line 10, I'm ending the headers. I'm saying, okay, this is rest of the headers. And here we are specifying the body part. From the previous lecture, you remember the HTTP response has the body part. So you need to do all this crazy stuff saying like, yeah, get, and you need to format it, encode it into UTF-8. You need to do all this stuff when you are doing these things from scratch. And with the post request, the situation is even more complicated. First, I want to get the output into the console. So I need to get the length of the output, which is being sent to me through the headers, right? So I'm accessing the headers of the request. So it's getting confusing. Then I'm extracting the data, and you need to extract the data from the stream of bytes because you are assuming it's a byte stream. And then you are reading it using the read function of the R file and setting this up into the post data. Then you are printing the data here on this line into the console, and then here you are specifying the response again, the same way as previously, right? So 200 const, content type, text HTML. Crazy stuff. So as you can see, you need to do this all manually, step by step, and this is not having any kind of complicated logic. I'm not evaluating some kind of data, whether you are sending the GET response to path which is, specified in my HTTP server. A lot of the stuff is being abstracted just to show you how hard is it to do it from scratch. Okay? But you can do it. You can even go for more complicated situations. I have here just post and get. You can specify here put method and delete method and do everything on one place, but you don't want to. Okay, and then here you are just creating the server class, so running the server class with the server address. This is like localhost and specific handler class. And then you are saying here like, please run it forever until I press some keyboard, and then this is some nice output. So how do we run it? We run the Python, so I'm inside the folder where the simple server.py resides, and I run Python simple server.py. When I press enter, in a while we will have a problem. Handler class is not defined, there is a typo, that's a handler class, save. Okay, we can run it again. And when we run it again, you will see that Informatica's mission, server starting on port 8080. This is just some my fancy name in different language. Yeah, and it's saying like server is starting on port 8080. Now, notice one thing. In one tab, I'm running this on port 8080, but in the other tab, I'm running the previous one, the simple HTTP server on port 90. So if I go to my browser and I run the same command as I did in previous, this is still working. Yeah, I can still access this kind of application here. It's still running there because it's running on the other port. But now if I go to localhost 8080, I can access the second server, the GET request for the output from there. So if I put here like miso, my name, so /miso, right? So you can see I can run multiple applications on different ports in my computer. But the most important one is this new server, right? So I'm sending the GET request and that was the output of it, right? And here you can see that I can even see all the output. So the GET request was sent to path /. That's what is outputted here on this line 6, right? So if I scroll here on line 6, I'm saying GET request, that's the GET request, the path, that's the path, the self path, that's the path from request, and these are the headers which has been sent to me. And if I scroll down, you can see that the browser is also requesting some favicon. The favicon is the little logo which is being displayed here at the top, but I don't have any favicon on this server, so there is no response for this. Yeah. So as you can see, you can even try the post request from Postman. It's your homework. Try to send a post request here using the Postman from previous lecture. What will be the output for your request? What will be the output in the console? But the important part to sum up this lecture is, as you can see, when you are building things from scratch, it's very hard. And because we don't have so much time, and because we developers are lazy, we want to use tools which are provided for us to make our lives more easier, which are creating extra abstraction on top of this. And that's the Django and Django REST library, which we will cover in later lectures. Okay, guys, I hope you like this video. Thanks you for watching. I hope you learn how the ports work and how to run the server in your local computer. I hope you understand what is the localhost, and I hope I will see you in the next lecture.